All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining. Oh, good afternoon, everyone. We've already passed the 12 o'clock hour. So yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. Today, we are going to be talking about VMware Horizon Cloud on Azure as I walk you through kind of an introduction to what it is and take you all the way through an initial deployment up to and including the initial launch of a multi-session Windows 10 desktop. All right. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Brian Zanoli, and I am a principal architect here at Entisys360 in the end user computing practice. I've been with the company now for 8 years and have focused on a number of different end user computing technologies from Microsoft to Citrix to VMware, along mobility, VDI, and everything that surrounds it. Craig, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Craig Colson. I am an EUC partner sales engineer with VMware. Been with VMware coming up on 5 years. Been doing virtual desktop and virtual applications since, wow, 2000. It's been a while.
Nice. So between the two of us, we'll be walking all of you through Horizon Cloud and specifically Horizon Cloud on Azure. But first, the most important slide I have today to share with you is lunch. After all, I know that's why you're all here to partake in an excellent shared lunch experience. So if you do have any problems with getting your lunch, who should you contact? The information is here on the screen. If you have not already received your lunch, please take this information down so that if you do run into any problems, you are able to get those issues addressed. If you lose the information or you forget to take this down, just reach out to us in chat and we'll help you out. All right, now that the important stuff is done, let's get on to the fun stuff. So Entisys360, end user computing, many of you already know this practice of ours and our end user computing focused and how we've excelled in end user computing as a company now for 20+ years. But I wanted to share with you kind of an overview of what these solution offerings look like. Starting with, of course, virtual desktop and applications, which is in large part what we're focusing on today. Right? But end user computing is more than just virtual desktops, more than just virtual applications. It's about overall workspace experience, workforce experience optimization, understanding kind of that end-to-end platform that is required to deliver the idea of a true digital workspace, of which VDI oftentimes is a key part of, right? And that also all fits into secure application access and how you are using these kind of tools, these kind of platforms to securely deliver applications and data to your end users in an efficient manner. And then coming to a new age of managing endpoints, devices, applications, and users with modern IT management. All of these solution sets fall into our end user computing practice. Some of them are newer technologies, some of them are tried and true technologies, but we do excel at all of them. So if you're here just to hear us explain Horizon Cloud on Azure, if you're here to listen to us talk about VDI and where VDI is going, that's great. If you'd also like to dive deeper into another conversation around some of these other tools and technologies, we have the skill set, we have the expertise for those as well. And today's business climate and even the conversation that we're having right now is in large part being impacted, I think in a very gigantic way, being impacted by the effects of COVID-19. You know, when we originally started down the path of creating this webinar, it was going to be about talking through that initial response to COVID-19 and then what it would be like getting back to normal, you know, and right now, it looks like the COVID-19 responsiveness in terms of the need to work from home is further increasing with a lot of the openings being rolled back. I think what that highlights is that right now is a time of change and disruption in what we're doing as a society, and oftentimes what we're doing in business. And so what we need is a way of addressing those kind of things where rapid change is just a reality, right? It's becoming our new reality. And when we started out, many organizations focused on a work from home right now, right? The far left, that was the original scramble, if you will, just to get any solution in place. Hey, I need to get VPN spun up for my remote users. Hey, I need to deploy physical desktop access. Just VDI quick, whatever I can do just to make sure that my users can keep working. Then, since then, many organizations have now gone back to those original solutions that have been deployed and said, hey, that was what we needed to do then, but we may have left gaps, user experience gaps or even security gaps. What can we go do with those original solutions to plug those gaps, to make sure that that solution doesn't compromise us from a security perspective, and that users are still able to be just as efficient and effective as they were in the office, if not more so. And then finally, some organizations are now taking a look at what are we going to do going forward with COVID-19 and the business continuity and the remote workforce focus being kind of the new norm. How are we going to reinvent the way that we're addressing end user needs for this modern age where remote workforce is pretty much going how users get work done, right? And the answer is that the technology is the same, but the priority and the approach, how we're handling this is a little different, right? Instead of only 20 to 30% of your users being remote workers, many organizations are 70 to 80, if not 100% remote work enabled. The remote desktop and VDI, the VPN are still the current solutions, but we're looking at other approaches, such as what was discussed, modern management, enabling bring your own devices, or personally enabled, corporate-owned, personally enabled kind of workflows, and gaining access to SaaS applications in a secure manner, so further leveraging SaaS applications, and implementing some kind of enterprise file sync and share utility. All of these solutions kind of come together to further ensure that your users are able to work just as effectively at home as they were in the office. And again, sometimes even more so. And then diving deeper and more specifically into a use case that I think we're going to touch on quite a bit today around Horizon Cloud is the idea of this hybrid and multi-cloud virtual desktop, virtual apps and desktop platform. All right. What is that, and why is that so important? Well, essentially, we start out with, historically everything's been on-prem, but we are starting to see the adoption of cloud being a very primary focus for virtual apps and desktops. Right, the underlying topic of Windows Virtual Desktop, as well as everything that Microsoft has announced in terms of what they're doing with Windows Virtual Desktop in Azure. All right, those are all key focuses of the day. And so, is just one cloud good enough, or should we be looking at this idea of that hybrid and multi-cloud? In this case here, let's look at what we gain by going to more of a hybrid or multi-cloud model. First, cost optimization. Right, we're looking at choosing the right cloud for the right cost purposes. Scalability and burstability, meaning I can now scale out to the cloud. I could just simply turn instances on, turn instances off as necessary. Right, that's the crucial benefit of the cloud, is that capability. Compliance and control, right, and flexibility. I would just kind of tie those two together. Compliance and control. If I need to deploy workloads to a government-backed cloud that meets my compliance requirements, I am able to do so if my virtual apps and desktops platform supports multiple clouds in a very easy manner. I'm able to make that a reality. Right? And then, of course, the flexibility to be able to deploy on-prem, to deploy in Azure, maybe AWS. Essentially, the choose your own location and choose your own destination of where your workloads are going to run. And setting the stage for kind of in general that hybrid and multi-cloud. You know, I went over the benefits of in general. Craig, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce the Horizon Cloud service and how it meets that need as well as many others.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, so the Horizon Cloud service does bring to you it's basically a control plane that allows you to have multi-cloud brokering. So whether it's the private cloud on-premise or you're leveraging VMware Cloud on AWS and Horizon 7 or Horizon Cloud on Azure, or even a Horizon 7 pod on Google VMware Engine, it's that single pane of glass that allows you the multi-cloud brokering. Also gives you some application lifestyle management capabilities, leveraging app volumes, image management, being able to take your images and deploy them out to multiple clouds across, different, whether it be, again, Azure, AWS, on-prem. We've also incorporated a cloud monitoring service that will give you insights as far as your utilization, resource users, which URLs, which pods are getting the most traction. Also give you some insights into the capacity that you have remaining for scaling up and out. And along with the multi-cloud brokering, the multi-cloud assignments. So being able to, from a single place, entitle your users to the appropriate pods and or pools that they need. Next slide. In order to gain access to the cloud plane in the Horizon Cloud service, you need to take advantage of the Horizon Universal license. This is our subscription-based licensing model. You can do named users, concurrent users. There's two flavors. You've got the full-blown Horizon Universal, which gives you your apps and desktops. Or with the Horizon Apps Universal license, you could leverage server-based published desktops and RDSH published applications, as well as on Azure specifically, WVD enables a Windows 10 multi-user sessions. So if you went with the Horizon Apps Universal, you could do published desktops from the Windows 10 multi-user. Again, this one license entitles you to implement Horizon on-premise, as well as Horizon Cloud or Horizon 7 on VMC on AWS, Horizon Cloud on Azure with WVD, Horizon Cloud on IBM, as well as kind of newer out there is the Horizon 7 on Google VMware Engine. Next. I really like this slide because it breaks down, kind of what the customer responsibilities versus VMware responsibilities are. So if you'll see on the far left here, this is representing your on-premise infrastructure. Here you see the customers are not only responsible for providing the hardware and the software-defined data center, but they're also managing and maintaining the Horizon platform, as well as desktops and applications. If you look at VMC on AWS, the hardware is provided for you by Amazon. The SDDC is provided for you, combination of Amazon and VMware. And the customer is responsible for managing and maintaining Horizon and the desktops and the applications. As you look towards our other Horizon Cloud offerings, where it's more of a desktop as a service, now all of a sudden the customer doesn't have to worry about hardware, SDVC, or the Horizon platform. They're just managing and maintaining their desktops and applications. Next. So as far as the infrastructure cost comparison, Brian, you guys have done this for some of your customers. Do you want to go over this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I think one of the aspects of the discussion of where to put your workloads comes down to cost. I do want to emphasize that when we're going through this journey with our customers, we don't just say, you know, which one's cheapest. You know, other things that come into consideration, such as, you know, what is the overall user experience? Where are your applications and where is your data? Data locality is a huge piece of that. Overall security, and then long-term strategy, making sure that it aligns with where the company is going overall. But cost is always a factor, and it's definitely an important one. So, you know, in exploring this with our customers, we've kind of learned a few things about which environments might make the best destination for a specific use case, right? Within the Horizon and Horizon Cloud deployment model. And so, you know, what we've found is on-premises, it's typically going to be the lowest cost when it comes to consistent and mature workloads, mature being, you know, well planned out. The user densities are relatively high and everything's kind of dialed in, and they stay relatively consistent, not a lot of seasonality to access, right? And, you know, we have defined here things like scalability. Obviously, on-premises, it's kind of tough to scale up new hardware, and it's really not possible to scale down outside of repurposing. Moving to VMC, VMware Cloud on AWS, we've found that if you're really able to push the hosts that are associated with VMware Cloud on AWS to their limit, it's an ideal platform for shift work, and meaning 24/7, right? Round the clock user access is required. And that's because you're really able to get every ounce of power and ounce of compute out of those hosts. So in those kind of situations, and you're looking to go to the cloud, VMC on AWS definitely makes sense. And with the scalability question, although it is per host scaling, it can still be relatively simple from a technical perspective using Elastic DRS, right? And there are even some automated integrations that allow for the next host to be scaled up and scaled down as users are logging in. So VMC on AWS can be a great platform for that. And then finally, Horizon Cloud on or the just Azure infrastructure in terms of what that offers you. You know, a great thing about this is it's very simple, built on Windows Virtual Desktop, and all that you pay with Windows Virtual Desktop is essentially just the Azure consumption cost for those licenses. And that also means that your cost per user is almost entirely or very close to just whatever that cost per hour is for that individual virtual machine. It also makes scale up and scale down very easy in terms of if you need to add 10 users, you just add and pay for 10 users. If you don't need those 10 users anymore, you just turn those off. There's also some certain tweaks that you want to make and tuning that you want to do to power management to get the full benefit of cost savings, and various approaches around whether you're going to go with just per user on demand or reserved instance licensing. But the Azure infrastructure can definitely be a pretty good platform, a pretty good destination from a cost perspective if you're looking to go to the cloud. Craig, I'll turn it back over to you to keep going through this.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Brian. So with Horizon 7 on VMC on AWS, there's two methods of deploying it. we have the native VMC deployment, which is leveraging your traditional vCenter based SDDC for both the management components as well as the desktop components. So each Horizon 7 pod consists of the SDDC. You've got the NSX gateway, and each pod is limited to roughly 2,000 virtual desktops. That number is not a hard number. A lot of that depends on the network traffic. That's the typical constraint based on a Horizon pod on VMC on AWS. Now, with the federated architecture, you're leveraging the EC2 architecture for the management components of your Horizon implementation. And what this does is it allows you to scale out beyond the 2,000 user limit and add additional pods for the desktop workload, and scales up to 10,000 sessions per pod. So you can quickly achieve great scalability by leveraging the EC2 components. All of these can be tied together back on premise, leveraging the cloud pod architecture. And now with the new cloud services, we have something called the Universal Broker that we'll get into a little bit later. Next slide.
Yep. Real quick on this, we brought in some of the focuses on other Horizon 7 and Horizon Cloud deployment types, just because to give you a complete picture of what Horizon Cloud is capable, we wanted to at least introduce you to these other deployments, as we're, of course, ultimately getting to where Horizon Cloud on Azure is able to fully leverage Windows Virtual Desktop, and that's what we'll be diving into later. So just wanted to touch base on that point. Let's continue on. Go ahead.
All right. So if you were to sign up with just WVD on Azure, what you're getting out of that is the client connection through the cloud plane. You're only really able to leverage the RDP protocol. Management is done through the Azure console, a lot of PowerShell based. I know 2.0 is gotten away from, it's reduced some of the necessity of PowerShell for getting the initial deployment out. You have some basic power management features that are included, full featured Windows client, profile and application management's done via FS Logic. And then you have the desktop images that are provided by Microsoft, which include Windows 10 Enterprise, the Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session, Windows 7 with the free extended support, and Windows Server. So that's 2019 or 2016. When you add the Horizon piece and the Horizon Cloud piece on top, you really get to take advantage of the Horizon display protocols, whether it be PCOIP or Blast Extreme. You also get to bring in the app volumes and dynamic environment manager pieces, which can also help with your management and maintenance costs of trying to maintain these pools by being able to separate out the applications. And Dynamic Environment Manager is a great tool to set up conditional policies on the fly as your users are authenticating, and it can be used in conjunction with FS Logic to really give you that personalized look and feel of virtual desktop that's not a persistent desktop. You also get the benefits I talked about from the Horizon Service Plane, which is the cloud management service, the hybrid environments, being able to broker and entitle connections, whether whichever cloud you want to use. So maybe some of your workloads going into Azure, but you have some current on-prem workload. It's nice to have that single pane of glass to kind of for the help desk to view user sessions and help troubleshoot and initiate those connections. The agent gets auto updated in Azure with the Horizon Cloud piece. It's an automated deployment of the Horizon agents into the image. It's really, very user-friendly to get up and running, which we're going to see moving on. One of the biggest pieces, though, is definitely this universal broker, which, if you're familiar with Horizon 7 Cloud Pod architecture, the requirements behind it. Actually, let's go ahead and move to the next slide, and we can kind of demonstrate. So currently, if you're leveraging Cloud Pod architecture for a multi-data center, multi-pod implementation of Horizon, you have to have a global load balancer in place. You're going to have a couple of data centers, and that global load balancer may send your initial traffic to one data center. And based on the access URLs, when you go to connect, you're going to go through the UAG, in this example, the Concord site, but find out that your desktop or published applications residing in Irvine. So now you have what's called hairpinning. So you're going through the load balancer, you're going down into Concord just to get set over to Irvine. Wouldn't it be great if you can go right to the right data center the first time around? Dramatic pause for the next slide. And so here we've got the universal broker. The universal broker, because it's part of the cloud plane, it has the insights into the environments where you're at. So this Concord site could be on premise, Irvine site could be Horizon Cloud on Azure, it could be Horizon 7 on AWS. There's a cloud connector that gets installed in an on-premise solution that connects to the cloud plane. And it gives all the information up to the cloud as far as the entitlements and pools. All that stuff is done in the cloud. So when you connect, your users make a connection, there's a single URL, regardless of which data center they need to go to, and they're redirected to the proper location. So, just a universal broker is currently available for Horizon 7 on-premise, as well as Horizon 7 on VMC and AWS. It is coming in Q3 to Horizon Cloud on Azure.
Yeah, this is going to be a huge benefit. In speaking with that hybrid multi-cloud, you might have pods deployed all over, and having the ability to just, abstract what was traditionally a very complicated control plane that had to be created using Cloud Pod architecture, and instead just rely on the Horizon Cloud control plane. It's going to be incredible. Makes things much simpler, no longer needing a global load balancer, and simplifies administration and user access across the board. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this coming to Horizon Cloud on Azure. And that is where, Craig, I'm going to thank you so much for going into the Horizon Cloud introduction, touching on Horizon 7 on VMC on AWS and Horizon Cloud on Azure. And it's now time to get into the really fun technical nitty-gritty stuff. So what we're looking at here is an overview of the architecture of what we're going to be deploying today. As you see, we've got a Horizon Cloud control plane up here in the kind of the top middle that is managing this environment that is deployed on Azure. Users accessing from the internet into the Horizon Cloud on Azure environment. We have VNet peering between this Horizon specific set of resource groups, this Horizon specific set of networks, in which that VNet peering is going to provide all of our virtual desktops and the Horizon infrastructure itself access to Active Directory, any files, any application data. Of course, we also may want to connect this on-premise, and for the on-premises connection, we're either going to be using VPN or ExpressRoute. This is optional. If you're 100% cloud, then all we need to worry about is just what's within these orange boxes here. walking through the specifics of what's within the Horizon Cloud deployment and what Horizon Cloud will pretty much automatically deploy for us. We've got the unified access gateways. These are, if you're familiar with Horizon 7, these are the same unified access gateways that are used to provide secure remote access, just that they're deployed automatically with an Azure load balancer in front and a public IP attached. Optionally, and not shown here, there's a unified access gateway that can also be deployed for internal access, so that if you do have, such as this site-to-site connectivity, and these subnets here are considered internal to your users, they would hit that UAG instead of the external one through the internet. Continuing on with the smart node managers, these are more or less like the connection servers, but more just a cloud connectivity and cloud caching manager. So this manages your Horizon pools, your Horizon-based images, and connectivity to the rest of the Azure infrastructure. During deployment, a temporary jump box will be set up. This is just temporary. It does not stick around once deployment is complete. This gets removed automatically. All right, moving on to the kind of the user layer side of things, user and image layer side of things. We've got a base VM that gets imported and an image that gets created from that base VM, and we'll walk you through the process of how that is handled with Horizon Cloud on Azure. And then as you deploy out pools, you will see VMs associated with those pools. Of course, we can have more than one pool. We can have different pool types focusing on desktops or applications. Everything gets deployed right here within this Horizon Cloud on Azure infrastructure within this little box. And this is where the technical walkthrough begins. Who's excited? I'm excited. We get to get our hands dirty. This is going to be fun. So, prerequisites. Before we can get started, though, there's a few things that we'll need. First of all, of course, we need to have the Horizon Cloud service, universal licenses, and a My VMware account to log in. We'll need Windows 10 E3 or greater or RDS CALs if we want to make sure that Microsoft doesn't get upset with us. We'll need a valid Microsoft Azure subscription and tenant with administrative access to that tenant so that we can log in and configure what needs to be configured from a preparatory standpoint. If on-prem is required, again, that's optional, but probably something that's preferred with most organizations, then we'll want to have already configured a VPN or express route to that on-prem infrastructure. We do rely on Active Directory or Azure domain services. Azure Active Directory is not supported, so we do need that full Active Directory infrastructure to support deployments. We'll need some essentially service accounts to handle both the domain bind and domain join. Then we'll need to be able to configure public and internal DNS records for our unified access gateways, the place where our users will be going to log into this Horizon Cloud environment. And finally, for Workspace ONE access integration, we'll need to have a connector deployed, quote unquote, on-prem. I say quotes because on-prem could technically still be Azure. It's wherever Active Directory happens to reside. And Active Directory can also live either in your on-premises environment, or you can deploy a domain controller to Azure to support your Windows Virtual Desktops and Horizon Cloud on Azure deployment. All right, what are we going to be doing today? So first on the agenda is we're going to be preparing our Microsoft Azure tenant. So there is some work that needs to be done ahead of time. Unfortunately, Horizon Cloud can't just hack into your Azure tenant and configure everything automatically for you, although that would be nice. It would probably raise a few security flags. So we'll have to go through the steps of preparing our tenant for access and for deployment. Then we'll go through and we'll deploy our initial Horizon Cloud pod. which will get things started, and that'll be our intro into the Horizon Cloud service. Then we'll import and we'll create an image. Then we'll deploy a pool that will host our Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session desktops. Configure the applications and desktop assignments so that users are able to log in. And in between this and configuring integration, we'll actually show launching of a session that shows that indeed we are on a Windows 10 multi-session desktop through Horizon on Windows Virtual Desktop. And then finally, we'll configure integration with Workspace ONE so we can aggregate all of these virtual desktops, aggregate it with maybe any other on-prem Horizon pods that have been deployed or VMC on AWS pods that have been deployed and already aggregated into a single user portal for access along with your SaaS applications. Bring it all together in one spot. Okay. And with this, I am going to flip over and let me zoom in for you guys because I'm assuming it might be hard to see on my super high resolution monitor. Is this coming up okay?
Yep, looks good.
Yep, looks good. Awesome. All right. So I skipped a step here. I'm already logged in to my Azure tenant, my Azure subscription. Let's go back home. As you'll see, this is just your normal everyday Azure portal. Jump in here, and the very first thing that we're going to want to do is configure our virtual networks. We already have a virtual network, but I'm going to configure another one just to walk you guys through that. All right, we'll create a new resource group. With the next iterative number here, Horizon Cloud Azure VNet 4. We'll specify the region that we're going to deploy. I'm just going to choose the region that everything else is deployed to. For IP addresses, I'm just going to leave default and the default IP address space. No point in modifying that. A /16 should be plenty of IP addresses. The original subnet, this original default subnet of a /24 should be fine. For security at this point, I'm not going to worry about customizing anything. Same thing with tags, not going to worry about any custom tags. Review and create, here we go. Creating my virtual network. And I will let that get created, which may take a little bit of time here. Normally doesn't take too long. So next, what we'll want to do, here, I'll show you on this here. Use one of the existing. So DNS is important. Remember, I did call out that Active Directory was a prerequisite. So I am using my single, non-production, of course, so single is okay. Active Directory domain controller as my DNS server. So I provide that DNS IP address. We want to make sure that that is configured so that everything within the virtual network is pointing to our Active Directory DNS server. Here it is. So let's configure DNS. Okay. Got this going. Service endpoints. SQL is a requirement here. So we're going to add a service endpoint of Microsoft SQL for this virtual network. And we're going to select the default subnet, make sure it's associated with that subnet. And now, because my Active Directory domain controller sits in a different VNet, then this VNet we just created, I am going to create a peering between this VNet and the other virtual network where my domain controller resides. So specify this value here. And the cross-directional, so configure the opposite direction peering. Everything else is okay. Yep, I want to enable access from each, and I don't need to enable forwarding access, so figure just as such. Now that we have the virtual network ready for Horizon to be deployed, Horizon Cloud to be deployed, we'll go ahead and configure the service principal, which is required for Horizon Cloud on Azure to connect to the Horizon tenant. So for this here, we'll go into app registrations. You'll see that I already have a couple here. I'll create a new registration, and doesn't really matter what I name it as long as I remember this name here. Just keep it at the default, everything else at the default, register. Right. And so now we have what's referred to as an app. And with this app, we'll need to create a secret, which will be used by the Horizon Cloud Smart Nodes to connect to the Azure tenant. I just keep in 1 year, so kind of being a little security conscious, and then Horizon Cloud Azure secret, and we'll keep the numbering convention going. All right, very important, copy this value, not you guys, because then you'll have access to my environment, so just look the other way, just real quick. All right, so I've got my secret. I'll go back here to my app registrations and app 3, and I'll grab a couple of values here. Application ID and directory ID. Just taking notes of these here. You'll want to do the same when you're going through and doing the deployment. It's very important that you capture these values. The only one that's absolutely key is the secret. If you don't capture that, you'll have to create a new secret. All right. Just taking note here. So we've got app ID, and I've got my directory ID. Okay. All right. Continuing on, we'll go back to Azure Active Directory. I will configure or go to, let's see, roles and administrators. Nope, getting ahead of myself here. So going to the subscriptions, here's my Azure subscription. We need also, as an identifier, the subscription ID. So I'll take note of this. And go to access control. And we'll add a role assignment. And we'll need to take the app that we just created, the service principal, and we'll need to assign that new service principal right here, app 3, the contributor role. This is required for Horizon to do what it needs to do. Click Save. And the last step, the last thing that we have to do in Azure is go to resource providers. And I'm not going to go through each and every one of these, but there are resource providers that are required to be enabled, to be registered for Horizon Cloud to do what it needs to do. There is documentation on what they are. There's a list of about 14 of them. Be sure that they are all registered. If not, just simply click on it and register before you attempt to deploy. Okay, I mean, that's it. Azure is ready to go. Didn't take too much time. Continuing on, now it's time to move over to Horizon Cloud. Well, we'll jump in here, providing your My VMware account credentials. You will see when I log in here, if I entered my credentials correctly, it takes me to this page. Actually, let me zoom in a little bit. There we go. It'll take me to a secondary login in which it asks for my Active Directory credentials. This is because, I'll admit it now, I did cheat a little bit. I already have some of this stuff configured. Don't worry, I'll still walk you through everything. But once you register Active Directory, it will prompt you for these Active Directory credentials as well. So I'll put in one of the Horizon admins under Active Directory, make sure I enter my password correctly, and now I'm logged in. And with any luck, Horizon Cloud works and it doesn't go down on me. I forgot to put in my prayers this morning to the demo gods, so hopefully they aren't angry with me. Okay, so getting started. This page will come up when you first log into the Horizon Cloud service, the administrative portal, but it might look a little bit different. Instead of on-premises and the two options of VMware Cloud on AWS and Microsoft Azure, it'll just prompt you to add cloud capacity. Since I've already gone through and added Microsoft Azure capacity at one point, this is what it's showing. So all I can do here is delete it from this screen, but you would use this screen to add said capacity. Don't worry, I can still go in and add more. So in order to do so, I go into capacity here, and it shows the existing pod that I've already deployed. I can select the drop-down of New to add a new Microsoft Azure pod, and it'll take me through the exact same wizard that was available the first time around. So we're going to create a new subscription, right, based on the one that we just created. So keep my naming convention, CAZ, demo, and we'll go with 3. I like 3 better. This is the information that we grabbed when we were configuring Azure, so we'll be sure to provide that. And if for some reason you are configuring Azure right now, if you already had a POC environment or trial environment stood up and you're going through and following the steps, please don't enter in the same specific information that I'm providing, because you will actually connect to my Azure tenant. All right, let's see if I got that right. Looks good so far. All right, so let's give a pod name here, demo 3 pod 1. Location, I've already created a location, but let's deploy to Irvine. I deployed to Sacramento last time around. Region, select the region that we deployed everything to in the Azure prep steps. High availability, yes please. Even though this is a POC, I still like to have 2 smart node managers. For the networking, I need to make sure I select the correct VNet. All right, so I do so here, select this VNet, and then I provide the subnets that are part of it. Well, helps if I give them the right number, so 10.6 dot, let's go with 2.0/24 desktop is 10.6. I'm going to go with 4.0, and I'm going to do 22. So I got plenty of room to grow. No, I'm probably never going to deploy 1,000 desktops, but I guess maybe you never know. I'm just going to use Google NTP servers in this case. You know, probably you would use either Active Directory or NTP servers that you already have configured. Not going to configure Workspace ONE Access at this time. I will do so later. So this is ready to go. Click Next. For this, I'm going to provide a fully qualified domain name for users to type in when they're connecting to Horizon. Now this I've already used for my old one, so I'm going to just create a fake one. Don't worry, it won't impact the deployment and the demonstration of connectivity. All right, so 10.0.0.4 is our DNS. I am going to upload the certificate here. Let me find it real quick. It must be in PEM format. So if it's PFX, you will have to convert it. But I have a wildcard that I'll be uploading. Enable public IP for the load balancer. Yes, we do want the public IP so that it's publicly accessible for external access. Otherwise, users would have to VPN. Use a different virtual network. Nope. I'm going to use the same virtual network VNet that was created before. You can create a different virtual network if you prefer. If there are security reasons why you want your DMZ and your UAG and any publicly facing IP addresses to be on a VNet that is separate from where these other services are being deployed. So I'll provide the subnet it's being deployed into. All we need is a /28. Enable. Sure not to if you're going to be using Workspace ONE Access. You'll want to configure two-factor authentication within Workspace ONE Access instead. Enable internal UAG. I can do so if I want to provide an additional pair of UAGs, as mentioned before, for the purpose of delivering access to internal users, users that are not coming from the internet. Provide the same DNS. No need to configure any custom routes. Locate my PEM certificate. And did I do it right or not? Let's see. Oh, looks like it's validated successfully. That is awesome. All right, so now we're just going to sit here and wait for 50 minutes for it to deploy, right? No? Okay, just kidding. But that is, we are now at a point where if we were to going to deploy this for real and going start to finish all the way through, there would be a bit of a break. It does take roughly 40 to 50 minutes to get everything stood up. So, you know, if we were doing this for real or you're doing this on your own, get up, stretch, grab some more coffee, get a bite to eat, whatever you may need to do. Since we have the magic of pre-existing deployments to work with and kind of the cooking show approach, I'm going to kind of take the turkey out of the oven, so to speak, and bring us to the next step. Getting started, if I return to this, this is where we would go in and need to configure, once it's done, once the pod deployment is done, Active Directory. Now, I already have it configured, so I'm not going to remove and reconfigure it, but I will at least show you all that you need is your NetBIOS name, your DNS domain name. LDAP is the only supported protocol, so that's what you will use. And then you will provide a bind username, bind password, and a secondary bind username. So in case the first one fails for some reason, password expires, etc., it has an auxiliary to connect. Then once done, you would just click domain bind if everything works and it's able to communicate with this Active Directory domain. That will succeed. Next, it'll ask you to configure administrators. which would look like this. Very simple, just add administrator, specify what type of administrator. This drop-down wouldn't be present in the first add administrator since it's asking for the administrator group, but afterward we can always add different administrators with different administrative roles. Then just type in the name of the group, and you can see that we can just add whichever domain group, security group we want to as the administrator account. I'd hit save, and at that point, it would actually pop you out of the Horizon Cloud service and ask you to re-log in, again, with those domain credentials that I showed you when I initially logged in. From here, the next step is desktop assignment. And with the desktop assignment, that's where you import your VM, you create the image that's associated with that imported VM, then you create a desktop farm or pool. I like to call it pool since it's kind of what WVD calls it. And then you assign those desktops to your users. Again, I've already handled all of this, but it doesn't mean we can't do it again. So I'll go to import VM. As you see, I have some VMs imported and active, but let's start with another one and show you what your options are here. First, you can either import a virtual machine that you've built yourself. So you've already installed the Horizon Cloud Agent components. You might have other applications, other configuration customizations on the image, and that's why you're bringing it in and you want to add it yourself. Or you've got the marketplace as the option. I recommend the marketplace and then customizing the image from there. It's just simpler, easier to get started and start testing, and it prevents any specific configurations that might interfere with the initial rollout deployment and process of getting that image turned into an actual pool that can be utilized by your users. When you hit select on marketplace, it brings down this option asking you where you want to deploy it. Well, I don't have a pod in Irvine yet, so I'm going to have to switch back to Sacramento and deploy to the existing one. And then we'll specify which OS type we're going to do here soon. I will join it to the domain, and I'll specify the domain that I registered for here. As you see under the OS types, you have a lot of different options of the image that the VM that you might want to import from an OS perspective. All of the Windows 10 flavors, even some with Office 365 Pro Plus pre-installed, all the way down to Windows 7 Enterprise, which is in tech preview, just as it shows here, for Horizon Cloud. And then Windows Server, you've got 2012 R2, 2016, and 2019. So quite a few options on the Windows landscape for deploying your applications and desktops however you would choose to. I'm going to select 1903 with Office Pro Plus already installed, maybe make things a little easier. Provide a local username and password. And make sure that they actually match. Let me try this again. There we go. And then provide a name for the template. So I'll just do, let's see, HCAZ Win10 template. Let's go with template 1. Now I will also show some of the advanced options. I'm not going to make any changes to this, but this is where if you are familiar with Horizon, you know that you can enable or disable certain things within the Horizon agent. If you need to have anything enabled, such as smart card, USB redirection, scanner redirection, this is where you would do so. I'm going to keep things as is and just hit import. Okay. This also can take some time, so we've reached another juncture where if you're doing this for the first time on your own, you may want to step away for anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes. It will go through various different agent statuses before ultimately being active. Active is required before continuing. You might hit one where it says imported, but it's not paired, so not paired, but import successful. Still not ready to go. Come back a little later when it's active. Luckily, since I already have an imported VM that is active and ready to go, I'm going to jump back to getting started and pretend that we're just dropping right back down into the next step, which is to create the image. When I go here to create this image under the wizard, it would normally pop up with the image creation wizard. Here it takes me to images, but it's the exact same process. I click new and it brings up the new image wizard. Location, right? Irvine's not ready. I'll deploy to Sacramento. I'll deploy to the existing pod in Sacramento, and I'll choose one of these desktops.
Hey, Brian, we have a quick question.
Cool.
They're looking for just understanding a little bit more about the optimized Windows image. What is exactly done? I'm assuming that is the VMware OS optimization tool. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep. Yeah. So if you're looking to optimize it exactly the way that that optimizer utility handles things, then just simply leave that enabled when you're going through the wizard. After you create or import the VM, and that's a really good question, because an important part of this is, what do you do to get the image actually ready, install applications, configure, etc. That actually has to be done before you convert the VM into an image, so important to note. So if you didn't select to have the optimizer run as part of the wizard, but you want to run, say, a custom version of the optimizer or only optimize certain features, once you import that VM, you can access it from Azure, and you can then go in and install additional applications, run those optimizations that you prefer to run, do whatever configurations you need to before ultimately creating the image. So yeah, excellent question. Thank you for asking, because it's very important that, you know, because it's Azure, it's a little different on how image management is handled versus what you may be used to on-prem. Okay. So continuing on, we see that the status is active. If it's not, it will warn you and throw an error, and it will not let you continue. Image name doesn't let me change it because it's converting that VM that I imported into an image. Company name, provide your company name, of course. And again, it wants a local username and password. See if I can get it right the first time here. Ah, perfect. And then from here, this is going to go through that process of converting that VM that was imported into an actual image that can be used by Azure to create the desktop pools. It is in transition, so what we'll do is we'll go through and we'll actually create a pool from the existing one, since this is another area where it may take some time, though typically not as long as the import VM, so anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. One thing that we can touch on while we're here, though, is I did discuss that before you go in and create the image, you'll want to make any changes. So then you might ask the question, how can you update the image once it's been created? Well, what you do is you actually click here on a published image, you say duplicate, it will duplicate that image and it'll place it back in your imported VMs. All right, so once you duplicate the image, it'll create a copy of that, throw it in imported VMs. Within Azure, you'll see that it is now powered on and running. You can go in, add the applications, perform Windows updates, whatever you need to do in order to get that image updated. And then the process will continue in reverse. So let's continue on going through the create desktop farm. So again, well, let's pretend nothing's configured yet. You would get to this step here, create desktop farm, and you would hit configure. Instead, it's going to take me to the list of farms that I already have deployed. So I'll click New, but this wizard is identical to what would pop up during the initial rollout. For a name, HCAZ demo pool, and we'll just call it 3. VM name, and let's go with Win10 and P3 dash. So the VM names will automatically be appended when Horizon deploys those virtual machines on Azure. So I am just simply going to put a dash in there. My preference doesn't have to be, just choose whatever your naming convention is, knowing that Horizon will automatically add the numbers to the end. Okay. Desktops is what I'm going to select because I am publishing desktops as part of the Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session. Oh, still no pod, so I'm going to go to Irvine. I'm going to switch it to Sacramento, use this pod here, and then I have the ability to select whichever model I would prefer for the virtual desktops. If I need a little horsepower, because this is multi-session, maybe I want to go to an E8 with 64 gigs, or maybe I decide 32 gigs is enough. But for this, I'm going to keep it small since this is just a demonstration in POC. I can also select SSD versus standard hard drive. Right? If it's a multi-user environment, I do recommend SSD for performance purposes. Definitely important to have that additional performance. I'll keep it at just a standard hard drive. Select the image that we're going to deploy from, which really doesn't matter which image for me in this case, but let's just pretend that I just created the VMT1 image as part of the previous step. So I'll select that. Then we select our preferred protocol. Blast Extreme, that's the one I want. I want that dynamic performance and bandwidth utilization. Preferred client type, well, I'm just old-fashioned. I'm going to use the Horizon client to connect, as I think it's a better user experience with more functionality. If I wanted the browser, the HTML5 client, you can select browser instead. Of course, have to select the domain that it's going to be joined to, and you can choose whether you would like to encrypt disks, as well as if this is going to be managed by NSX Cloud. Neither of those in this case, so we'll just keep on. Minimum number of VMs, maximum number of VMs, just as they're described. How many VMs you'd want to have available at minimum versus how many you'd like this to automatically scale to based on what user needs may be, right? And that's based on this session per VM number right here, which is your max capacity is 20 sessions. So at 21, it might flip over and power on another VM or deploy another VM. Power off protect time, you can pretty much just keep this at 30 minutes. It has to do with erroneous power ons based on this session analysis and performance. Then we've got VMware making sure that you're assuring them that you have the Windows licenses that you need. Because this is temporary, I will say yes, but of course you would want to make sure that those licenses are in place. Next, we get into maintenance. One of the major benefits of this one of the major benefits of Horizon Cloud was the power management capabilities that it has. And part of that includes rolling maintenance and just overall power management, something that it allows, it automates for you so that you don't have to worry about that. And it does so in a rolling way so that it does not impact users. You have two options for maintenance type, scheduled or session. If you go with scheduled, of course, you can choose the recurrence, daily or weekly. If you go with weekly, you have to specify which day you want it to take place. Either way, daily or weekly, you would specify the scheduled hour, either from anywhere from 0 to 23. So it's on a 24-hour clock. Specify the number of concurrent quiescing VMs, meaning how many VMs will at the same time go through maintenance and be either restarted or rebuilt. The higher the number, the faster you will go through maintenance, right? But the more VMs you may have offline, if there are any users that for some reason just jump in right at your defined maintenance window. So a good balance here to keep in mind. Probably about 5% of your total pod amount or potential pod amount. All right, and then restart. Do you want to just reboot it, or do you want to perform a full, complete rebuild from the base image? If you go with session, this is what it looks like. This says that each VM will accommodate however many sessions before it then determines that it needs to go into maintenance. So, you know, more active environments, maybe you don't want to do it based on a time interval. You want to do it based on how aggressively users are hitting that VM, since that can correlate to where it's starting to get a little dirty, a little messy within the OS, and may have been up for too long and may need to be rebooted or rebuilt. I'll keep it at scheduled. I'll go with Sunday. I like that time. Hopefully nobody's working at that time. All right. And then power management. Do you want to optimize performance, balance, optimize power? My default here is always just optimize for performance. And it's going to give you the best user experience. And then handle power management so that you make sure that you've got scheduled power times. And I'll show you that here. But first, timeout handling. Will you ever log off a disconnected session? No. You can do it immediate or timeout after a certain amount of time. The max session lifetime, this is a true max session. So after 10,080 minutes, Horizon will automatically log out the user, even if they're still connected. So configure this with what you feel is necessary for your environment. And then the session timeout interval is after how much time the user has an idle session will they be disconnected. These are pretty high amounts, so I would probably adjust them down in a real world environment, but for this, I'm going to keep them as is. Then the scheduled power management. This is where you have the ability to schedule when your VMs are going to be on to ensure that you have the required number of VMs powered on and ready to go for when the users need that immediate connection, right? The logon times need to be kept low. Maybe after hours you decide if they connect, if it takes an extra minute or two for the VM to power on, that's fine. But during the hours of, say, 7 a.m. to, say, let's go with 6 p.m., you want them to be powered on and have a minimum, well, I don't have 2 VMs, of course, so have a minimum number of VMs associated with, or associated and powered on with this pool so that when users connect, they immediately have a desktop that they can connect to. I'm not going to worry about this here, but I would recommend specifying these power management schedules to get the most out of your Horizon Cloud deployment, balancing both cost and performance. So you can select the days, multiple select if you'd like. All right, so you can schedule it just to take place during the week. I will delete this, hit next, submit. All right, now it'll create this pool. And here's another spot where it might take a little while to get this pool deployed and ready for access. So we're going to jump back in, go back to the Getting Started menu, and we're going to see what it looks like when we need to create a new desktop assignment. So for that, I'll hit go. It'll take me to assignments, and I will create a new assignment. So with this, I still want to do desktops, right? So that's what I originally sought after. I'm going to go with a Windows 10 multi-session desktop. I can choose between dedicated, floating, or session. Session is what you need if you want to do the multi-user Windows 10. So make sure you select session. As you can see, it also reduces some of the amount of information that you need to provide because it simplifies it as just a simple publish desktop. select the pod, select the location, select the farm that I want to associate with it, right? One that doesn't already have an assignment, so I'll select pool 2, and then I'll just give it some name. Click next. Which users do I want to assign to it? Which user groups do I want to assign? I will assign my demo users group that I had created and populated some users into. The assignment is done, and boom, click finish, and now I've got a new assignment. All right. So next, we just wait for this to be done. And if you were doing this in a real world situation, you would simply, let me see if I can move this over. You would simply wait for this final assignment to be ready. It can take a little bit while for everything to power up. But we've already got everything stood up, so I'm going to take you right there to the URL that was specified. Again, this is now hitting the Unified Access Gateway public IP that was provisioned. Before this will work, though, what we would have had to do is go in and configure DNS. So I want to show you that real quick on where you would grab that from. If you go back into your virtual machines, you'll see it deploys a few VMs on its own, and this UAG is part of it. So if I click on the UAG here, there should be a public IP address that's associated with it. This is the public IP address that you will need to provide in DNS that corresponds to whatever URL you entered in when deploying the pod. In my case, it was horizonaz.e360demo.com. So make sure to update your DNS record externally for that A record. Just as a reminder, virtual machines, it's going to be the UAG virtual machine under public IP address. And if all is well, when I log in here, enter my regular username and password. It'll bring me right in. Oh, look, and this assignment's already ready to go. Let's see if it's actually ready for launch. Look at that. It's logging me in, preparing the Windows environment, getting my user account ready for initial login. Now, ordinarily, if we were doing this in a real environment, we would have certain things configured, such as maybe like Dynamic Environment Manager or FSLogix, as well as a few other applications installed, group policies configured. I have done none of that, so I would say that although we are being logged in, if this wants to cooperate, there we go. Although we were being logged into a real virtual desktop that's hosted in Azure, and we did so in relatively good time, this does not mean that we're 100% done. There's still a little bit to do: image customization, how to handle data, back-end applications, etc. So this got us off the ground, and as you can see, an initial POC or even pilot can be done in very quick time. But do also remember that the user environment customization is still on the agenda when rolling this out into production. All right. But as you can see, we even have Office installed, and if I had an Office 365 subscription, I would be able to sign in and launch Office all from this desktop that I had no customization, no install, didn't have to install VMware Horizon Agent, the VMware Horizon Performance Tracker. It was all done automatically for me. Okay. Now, one final piece that I did promise on the agenda is Workspace ONE Access integration. Let's jump into that. How do we get Workspace ONE Access integrated with our brand new Horizon Cloud and Horizon Cloud on Azure pod. For that, we go to Identity Management. You'll see that I already have this configured, but just as with the steps previous, we can still walk you through what it would take to get everything configured. I'm going to go to this first because it asks for some information, but it'll quickly point to the SAML IDP metadata URL from your Workspace ONE access deployment. So I'm kind of paused right now. I won't be able to move forward. What are some other things that are needed before we get going? Well, let's review and I'll show you. First, a connector. I listed as a prerequisite one of the connectors. So we need to make sure that we do have a connector tied to this Azure environment that points to, that has communication connectivity to Active Directory. So this connector has already been deployed and synced up with my Workspace ONE access environment, and that's already ready to go. So assuming that this is already done, the next steps that I'm about to show you would be all that you would need to do to get this configured. So where do we go to get this IDP information? Go to Catalog, hit Settings, SAML metadata. We would copy this URL right here, go back to our Horizon Cloud environment, and paste that in. That's all there is to it. Not a whole lot going on there. Pretty simple. Pod will specify the location. We'll specify the pod. This is not going to work because I already have an environment set up or the Workspace ONE access environment integrated, so it won't let me duplicate it. But I would provide that same horizonaz.e360demo.com URL that corresponds to the Unified Access Gateway to the external access up there. If I wanted to automatically redirect users to Workspace ONE anytime they provided this URL, I can enable that here. That is optional. So that way you can force all users to Workspace ONE access. Why might you want to do that? Well, let's say because you do want to have multi-factor authentication enabled, and as I said before, if you're going to do Workspace ONE integration, you don't want to have two-factor authentication enabled. In that case, you'll definitely want to make sure that users are redirected because you can enforce multi-factor authentication on your Workspace ONE configuration so that when users log in, before they can get to the Horizon Cloud pools, they have to enter a second factor. So I will cancel that because I already have my trusty connection here. As far as what's next, if this would get out of my way here, I'd be able to show you. So next step, so we've got that all configured on that side. But now we've got to configure the virtual apps collection here. Before we do this, there is another step that needs to be done that I couldn't do as part of this walkthrough and that I already had to have pre-configured, and that is the environment needs to be configured for trusted communication so that the direct communication between the Workspace ONE access connector and the pod managers is secure. And that is done by uploading certificates. So you'll want to make sure that you have certificates ready that correspond to the internal domain name. I went ahead and created these certificates. They are in cert format and key format, so you actually need to separate out cert and key to upload them. I went ahead and did that already, and that allows my connector to communicate with the pod manager in a secure and trusted manner, which is a requirement by Horizon. In addition to this, I will show you here, we'll create a new virtual apps collection. You must have a DNS entry applied, which corresponds to those pod manager load balanced IP address, which you can find in here. So if I go into my virtual networks, and I go to VNet 1, where I have the network interfaces. Scroll over here, and you see that you've got load balanced IP addresses that you can grab right here, pod LB. Grab that IP address, and that is going to be the IP address that you provide with the DNS name that corresponds with those pod managers. It can be any DNS name. You'll just need to provide it here when we go through this wizard, and I'll show you what this looks like. Right, for the connector, just provide whatever name you would like to provide, E360HC EasyDemo 2, or this is the name of the pod, the connection itself to that pod. This is the connector you're going to use. This is the connector that we deployed into my Azure environment that has communication with the Active Directory domain controller deployed there. I will add a tenant. Right, this is the tenant host. So this is whatever that tenant name is. So this is the tenant pod DNS entry. Dot whatever the domain name that corresponds to it is. You'll need to provide an admin user and an admin password. And I know we're running short on time. I promise we don't have very much left. So just give us 5 minutes and we'll wrap up. Admin domain, E360 demo in NetBIOS form, case sensitive. The URL where users go to access the environment. And true SSO. If you want to make sure that the users can simply leverage their credentials that they sign into Workspace ONE with to also sign into Horizon, you would want to enable this, or they'd be, if you don't enable this, they'd be prompted twice when connecting. Keep the custom ID mapping the same unless you have reason to change it, and then click Add. Go ahead and cancel this because I already have one that's configured, and I'll show you the configuration there. Here's the tenant host name that was created and the URL that's provided. So now, if I sign into, bringing up a browser here, so if I sign into Workspace ONE with my HCE360demo.com credentials, provide my username here and password, you will see that when I sign in, I have this pool available to me since it's based on the pod that was specified and the pool that was specified. Here's what is available for access. Click on this, launch it. It asks for the password again. As I mentioned, I don't have true SSO enabled, so I have to enter my credentials twice. And then it's going to open into a Horizon session. Loading the desktop. Good sign so far. Boom. By default, it opens in full screen. But I can reduce that down, and here we go. Launched and accessed through Workspace ONE. All right. Al, I haven't heard from you in a while. Are there any questions that have been lingering?
No, we got all of them addressed. They were asking about protocols that we're seeing commonly out there right now. And of course, the answer is Blast Extreme is becoming probably one of the more popular protocols in VMware's arsenal. So I don't know if you have any other comments you want to make on that one.
No, I think Blast Extreme is kind of going to be the go forward chosen protocol for VMware, even though it can do RDP, it can do PCO-IP for especially for WAN connectivity. Blast Extreme just does a much better job.
That was it. Looks
Great.
like something just came in a moment ago. Brian actually says, "Are we able to use our own customized window images?" I think you addressed that a little bit at the beginning. So if you want to talk about that one more time.
Yeah, you are able to use your own customized Windows images. Going through and doing the import, I'll just jump back in real quick. If you look in Horizon Cloud, under imported VMs, when you import a VM, you have the option to add your own that's already created. Well, I don't have file shares yet. So you have to connect to file shares. So you have the ability to add your own that you've already created with the applications installed, with the OS customizations already performed, whatever those customizations may be, or you can pull from the marketplace, but you're not forced to pull from the marketplace. Does that answer the question?
Looks like it does. You got a big old thanks and a yup.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Final little thing. One more minute. I know I said 5 minutes ago. VMware Test Drive. If you're interested in trying out what I just went through from a user experience perspective, VMware Test Drive is a great way to prove that out. It's a fully interactive environment. You wouldn't be able to see the administrative side, what the administrator is seeing, but from the user side, they actually do have Horizon Cloud on Azure workloads deployed. So you can log in, test it out, see what the performance is like. It's available through Workspace ONE Access, so you get to see how it plays with all of the other Horizon pods that may be deployed on-prem or in VMC, as well as other SaaS applications. So you can see it as kind of that full Workspace portal viewpoint. If you're interested in doing a full POC around VMware Horizon Cloud on Azure and going through the steps that we just went through and you want to try it out yourself, let us know. Right now, VMware is offering 100 licenses for a trial of 90 days. So you will be able to have plenty of time to go in there, get it deployed, test it out, see if you like it, customize your own images, customize the environment, expand, scale up, scale down, whatever you'd like to do within that 90-day period. And it's something that we can help you out with. That offer right now is good through the end of July. So you have a little while to think about it, but don't think too long. If it's something that you're interested in there's very little cost to you. You do have to pay for the Azure consumption, but so far I've only burned through about $30, $40 testing out everything that I showed you today. So the cost is really minimal to get started with a proof of concept. So let us know. We'll also be following up with you. We've got some blogs. You may have seen the blog post that I did before this. We will have the rest of the series that we'll send out to you that walks you through all of this as a recap of everything that we covered today. And we'll also just reach out, touch base, see how you enjoyed this webinar, this walkthrough, and if we can help you in any way, whether it's VMware Horizon Cloud, Workspace ONE, or any other end user computing needs. We're happy to be here to help. All right.
Right, we do have 2 more quick questions that just popped in just a moment ago from Donald and Sean. So if you take a look at those real quick.
Yep, let me bring those up. Let me get the Q&A. Let's see. All right. So one of the questions is for an all Citrix shop running on ESXi, how cost attractive is it to move to a Horizon solution like this? I think what we're seeing and what you saw today is that the deployment itself is pretty simple. It's been highly simplified. in what you're able to do and what you're able to accomplish. And oftentimes that's been a huge barrier to changing platforms is, okay, well, what's the operational expenditure going to be if I'm going to switch from one platform to another? You know, obviously there is a license charge transition, but I think based on the simplicity of this deployment and the ability to transition over in such a simplified way, and since it already rests on top of Windows Virtual Desktop, you're going to see that cost significantly minimalized. And what I would recommend doing is look at the entire VMware end user computing vision and capabilities. You saw Workspace ONE Access was a part of Horizon Cloud on Azure. Well, that is meant to aggregate various identity sources, aggregate and integrate with SaaS applications, and bring everything together. And that's just one additional piece that VMware offers. So when you're looking at doing a cost comparison, keep those things in mind, see where your organization might need some of those pieces, tools, and components for kind of to deliver the full efficiency of a remote workforce, because oftentimes that's where the cost savings is going to come in. All right.
Yeah, I think there's one more from
Second.
Sean.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Second
And
question
then we'll probably wrap it up there.
I'll say absolutely. If anyone is looking for a partner to help them with rolling this out, whether you're transitioning to Horizon and Horizon Cloud on Azure, or you're looking to try out Windows Virtual Desktop and see what the benefits are of having Horizon Cloud deployed and layered over it, we are here to help you throughout that entire process. We're definitely a partner that you can work with. Lots of expertise, lots of experience, and we've been doing this for quite some time. We'd love to help, for sure.
Sounds good. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thanks for everybody for attending.
Yeah, thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your day. Until next time, take care.